Have you ever walked into a room and without saying a word felt something shift? It wasn't the looks, it was the bodies. A subtle tension that permeated the space. You can't explain it, but you know it was there. People shift, look away, force smiles, feign distraction. And deep down, something inside you also realizes you're not welcome as a neutral presence. You're noticed before you even verbally exist. Your silence speaks volumes, and it disturbs. Carl Jung would call this archetypal tension. It's not charisma. It's not beauty. It's the involuntary activation of the collective unconscious. When someone carries a deeper inner field than usual, a field that lives between what is and what has been forgotten, the unconscious of others responds. You become a kind of mirror no one asked to look at, a reflection that doesn't show the face, but what lies behind the expression. And this kind of presence cannot be controlled, nor is it easily understood. It precedes language and ignores social conventions. It speaks a language others can't name, but feel in their skin. Most people live within the confines of their persona, the social mask created to adapt, survive, and be accepted. They haven't been trained to deal with what doesn't fit the script. But when someone enters with a bare soul, even if silently, everything false begins to creak, and the world reacts. Some people approach with fascination. Others recoil as if facing an abyss. What changes isn't you, it's what you activate in them. And this kind of activation is rarely conscious. You've noticed this from an early age. As a child, you'd walk into places and feel the adults changing their tone. Teachers would pay more attention. Classmates would look at you strangely. No one would say anything clearly, but you already knew. There's something in you that disrupts the silent order of things. And while this feels like a gift, it also feels like a threat. Because there's no manual for dealing with what you feel but can't see. And this, to a mind conditioned to simplify everything, is an intolerable noise. Jung believed that these manifestations do not arise by chance. They are living remnants of an ancestral psychic content. You, unknowingly, carry within you unresolved symbols, untamed forces, aspects of the self that escape the logic of everyday life. And when this encounters a superficial environment, the dissonance is immediate. You don't need to do anything. Its mere presence is destabilizing. Because the collective unconscious is like an electric field. It recognizes the truth even before consciousness formulates the thought. And when this truth appears, even if formless, it destabilizes the foundations of the false. That's why so many feel uncomfortable around you. And it's also why you, at some point, tried to soften your presence. To be softer, more sociable, more accepting. But something in you always resisted. Because even when you tried to hide it, the impact remained. People still hesitated, they still commented, they still reacted. As if what you tried to hide gained even more strength precisely when stifled. What is true does not accept being silenced. It escapes in your eyes, in your posture, even in your silence. This is the curse and the gift of archetypal tension. You don't choose to have this presence. But at the same time, you can't deny it without hurting something essential within yourself. And over the years, this begins to weigh on you. Because you don't understand why certain encounters are so intense. Why certain people react with irony, sarcasm, or excessive sympathy. As if they were trying to compensate for something they don't even understand. Jung would explain this as unconscious resistance. The ego trying to prevent the collapse of the persona in the face of contact with a more integrated psyche. But you're not integrated because you want to appear profound. You're simply tired of living on the surface. Tired of pretending everything is fine when there's chaos. Tired of responding with everything's fine when your body is at war. And when someone lives with this transparency, even if silent, they become dangerous to a society that thrives on appearances. Your truth doesn't accuse, it reveals. And revealing, for those who live in disguise, is violence. That's why you often attract confessions. People tell you secrets on the first date. They reveal pain they haven't even told their own friends. Then they disappear. They drift away. And you're left with that feeling of being used as a confessional booth that wasn't chosen, but was always there. You didn't ask for it. But your energy offered a space no one else can, the space of truth, and not everyone is ready to inhabit it for long. Jung said that when the shadow is activated, it defends itself, and if it can't attack directly, it projects. That's why so many people accuse you of being cold, distant, arrogant, complicated. They're not describing you. They're describing the frustration they felt when their masks began to slip. You didn't break their defenses with words. You did it with presence. And nothing is more dangerous for someone who lives in character than encountering someone who isn't acting. But what about you? Who holds that impact? Who welcomes you after others have left? Who realizes that behind your density lies a heart exhausted from being misunderstood? You don't just carry your own truth. You carry the silences of others, their displaced pain, their confusions thrown at you as if they were your own. And no one asks if you're okay. Because deep down, everyone assumes that those with a strong presence also have infinite emotional structure, which isn't true. Archetypal tension exacts a price, and that price is loneliness. A specific loneliness, not of being alone, but of never being fully seen. Because to see yourself, it takes courage, and psychic courage is rare. Jung knew this, and that's why he dedicated his life to studying what no one wanted to see, the unconscious, the shadow, the unspoken, because that's where freedom resides. But to touch that freedom, you have to go through everything that hurts before it. You are often this portal. You are not the pain of others, but you remember it exists. And by remembering, you become unclassifiable, because no one knows where to place you. You are not the most friendly, nor the most sociable. You are the most genuine. And this dismantles internal hierarchies that many have spent their lives building. You shatter predictability, and the unpredictable is the territory of the unconscious. And even without knowing it, you begin to walk more cautiously. You observe before speaking. You sense the environment before opening up. You understand the game before being invited to play, because your soul has already taken too much beating simply by existing. And yet, you remain. Silent, yet present. Invisible, yet felt. Alone, yet whole. This is your strength. Not the strength that shouts, but the one that sustains. Not the one that convinces, but the one that radiates. Not the one that demands, but the one that reveals. It's at this point that everything starts to change, because there comes a time when you no longer try to contain what you carry. You simply exist as you are. And this moment is dangerous, not for you, but for the emotional system people have created to survive. A system made of pleasantries, masks, and superficial compliments. When you exist without needing to mold yourself, you show that it's possible to live differently. And that's revolutionary. And revolutions, even silent ones, cause ruptures. You don't attack, but everything fragile collapses before you. Your existence becomes subversive not because you scream, but because you don't lie. You become a living reminder that there's something beyond performance. And not everyone can handle that. Some will want to erase you, others will idealize you, few will see you. But your mission was never to be understood. It was to be whole. But the real question that still hangs in the air perhaps is this: what exactly is it inside you that even without a name, without intention, and without control, alters the world around you? And could it be that what you thought was just discomfort is actually a calling? Something much greater is being awakened within you. And the journey, which has been lonely until now, may be about to become sacred. But to understand what this presence truly holds, you'll have to dive deeper. And that dive begins in the next part. You've carried something inside you for as long as you can remember. It has no name, but it carries weight. It has no form, but it takes up space. It's as if there were a secret engraved in your existence, something the world around you doesn't see, but you feel it all the time. It's not a memory. It's not a specific trauma. It's not an identifiable pain. It's older than all that. It's as if your soul remembers something the entire world has forgotten. And no matter how much you try to rationalize, explain, define it, you always come back to the same point. There's something inside you that doesn't belong in the noise around you. Carl Jung would write that you live closer to the unconscious than most. And this isn't poetry, it's psychic structure. Your sensitivity isn't weakness, it's attunement. Your difficulty fitting in isn't a defect, it's an internal resistance to an adaptation that requires forgetting the essential. While everyone else seems distracted by chasing goals, images, and rewards, you remain stuck with one question. What does it all mean? And why do I feel so much? Ever since you were little, you felt more than you should have. You picked up on nuances in what was said. You noticed unexplained mood swings. You absorbed what others didn't name. Sometimes, after a simple encounter, you felt drained, but you didn't understand why. Family dinner might seem cheerful on the surface, but it left you feeling uneasy. School, with its noise, its comparisons, its arguments, felt like a theater where everyone was pretending, and you saw this with uncomfortable clarity. Not that you knew how to articulate what you saw, but you knew something was off. And over time, you stopped talking about these perceptions, because every time you opened your mouth, people said you were exaggerating, that it was all in your head. And you learned to keep it to yourself, to observe in silence, to feel in secret. Over the years, this hasn't disappeared. On the contrary, it's become more pronounced. You can tell when someone is lying, even if their tone of voice is calm. You sense tension in a room before you even understand the reason. And the strangest thing, you often sense sadness in people who are smiling, or you sense anger in calm speech. As if there were a second layer, an underground layer, where the truth vibrates silently. And for some reason, you hear that vibration. Jung would call this an active unconscious, a psyche that, instead of living only on the surface of consciousness, constantly dives into the deep waters of the soul. This psychic structure comes at a price, because by perceiving too much, you disconnect. The world seems too loud, too fast, too false, and you try to adapt. You force interactions. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You answer yes when you want to say no. You go to places that don't nourish you. But all of this drains you, because within you lies a compass that doesn't point to acceptance. It points to truth. And this, in a society that values performance and superficiality, is a threat. Because you don't fake it well. You try, but your body betrays it. Your gaze betrays it. Your absence from certain conversations is noticed. And others, without knowing why, begin to react. They say you're distant, that you think too much, that you don't participate. But what they don't know is that you're present, just on a level few achieve. A simple example, a conversation at work. Everyone's talking about the weekend, TV shows, shopping. You listen, you try to get into the rhythm, but something inside you feels uneasy, because you notice the discomfort in the look on the colleague's face when they laugh too loudly. You notice the anxiety disguised as excitement in the tone of voice of someone speaking quickly. You realize that no one is really there. They're all acting. And you feel all of this. And because you feel it, you keep quiet. Because you know that if you say what you see, it will seem critical, or strange, or too intense. This doesn't just happen at work. It happens in family gatherings, in romantic relationships, in friendships. Everywhere truth has been replaced by convention. And then you start to question, am I the problem? Why do I always feel left out? Why does everything seem so shallow? Why do ordinary conversations tire me so much? The answer may lie precisely in what you carry and have never known how to name, a living connection to the collective unconscious. You don't just seek to fit in, you seek meaning. You want to understand why we are here, why people do what they do, why we repeat patterns, why we feel so much and talk about it so little. And the more you search, the further you distance yourself from the norm, because the norm was constructed to avoid the abyss of truth. Jung said that the process of individuation, the path to becoming who you truly are, begins when you stop running from your own depth, when you accept that there's something in you that doesn't fit into ready-made models. And that's lonely, but it's also liberating. Because on this path, you begin to realize you're not broken. You're just awake in a sleeping culture. And being the only one awake in a dark room isn't a blessing. It's a liability. This responsibility manifests itself in small gestures. You feel the need to listen more deeply. You feel the need to observe beyond words. You feel the need to honor what you feel, even when you can't explain it. And by doing so, you begin to access layers of yourself that seemed unreachable. Moments of silence begin to make sense. Contact with nature moves you in a strange way. An old song triggers memories you've never experienced. A simple conversation awakens something that makes you cry, as if every detail of reality were connected to something greater, something that pulses within you and never fades. And here comes the surprise. This weight you carry? It's not a defect. It's an antenna connected to something ancient, something humanity lost by choosing speed over presence, by choosing control over listening, by choosing the external over the internal. You feel too much because you are part of this missing link. Your soul doesn't want to consume, it wants to remember, it wants to return, it wants to integrate. And so, you attract experiences that test your structure, people who can't handle your presence, relationships that demand you diminish, environments that ask you to hide. But the more you try to suppress your intensity, the more it builds, until it explodes. Whether in the form of crisis, withdrawal, exhaustion, or silence, a silence that isn't empty, it's protection. You often isolate yourself, not out of arrogance but out of necessity, because being in the world hurts when the world doesn't speak to what's most alive within you. But there's beauty in that. Because little by little solitude ceases to be absence. It transforms into sacred space, a place where you can finally breathe, where you don't have to pretend, where there are no demands, where you can simply feel, and in that feeling you begin to find yourself. Jung said that archetypes are eternal structures that manifest in all of us, but that only some have the courage to face them. And when someone carries these structures more actively, they don't live an ordinary life. They live a journey that requires listening, surrender, and above all, courage. The courage to not run away, the courage to remain, the courage to continue even when everything tells them to turn back. If you've made it this far, maybe this is your journey. Maybe you're one of those few. Maybe what you carry isn't a mistake, but a map, a calling, an invitation. And maybe, just maybe, what you've avoided most within yourself is exactly what the world needs most. But what happens when this call intensifies? When you can no longer ignore it? When your soul begins to scream silently? When the questions cease to be intellectual and begin to burn in your body, in your dreams, on your skin? Maybe the answer is closer than you think, and the next part of this journey could change everything. You don't have to ask. People just talk. They start conversations with banal, almost automatic phrases. But within minutes, the tone changes. Their gaze alters. Their voice wavers. And then, as if something has slipped out of control, they begin to open up. They tell you things they've hidden even from themselves. They reveal traumas, fears, desires that have never been named. You don't pressure, you don't insist. You're just there, present, silent. But it's precisely this silence that disarms. You offer a space that the entire world avoids, the space of truth. Carl Jung wrote that there are human types who function as unconscious mirrors. They are not therapists. They are not counselors. They are nothing, and therefore, they are everything. Their mere presence activates the other person's unconscious, as if their energy were saying, "You don't need to lie here." And few are prepared for this, because behind the desire to be understood lies the dread of being seen. Truly seen. And this kind of seeing is neither gentle nor violent. It is inevitable. Have you ever noticed this? Have you noticed how even people who claim to dislike depth end up opening up around you? How even skeptics confess their dilemmas when they're alone with you? It's as if your listening reveals what they didn't even know they meant. And when they speak, something is released. But something also breaks. Because with revelation comes awareness. And awareness almost always hurts. It hurts more than the lie that covered it. But why does this happen to you? Why do you, among so many, possess such a profound power of listening that it transforms banal conversations into intimate revelations? What exists in your emotional field that opens doors that have been sealed for years? And most importantly, why do these people disappear after they open up? They walk away. They pretend nothing happened. They look at you strangely the next day. And you once again remain silent, holding on to everything that doesn't belong to you, but was left within you. The answer lies in the Jungian concept of the mirror archetype. You don't speak to the personality, you speak to the soul. And this breaks down defenses. Jung said that the persona, this social mask we use to move us, resists the presence of someone who has already overcome their own disguise. When someone has gone through their own abysses and come back whole, they are no longer safe for those still living in denial. You don't offer comfort, you offer truth. And truth is rare food, but it is dense food. And not everyone is prepared to digest this kind of emotional nourishment. Have you ever wondered why you're so often remembered fondly, yet kept at a distance? Why do people miss you but can't stand your presence for long? Why do they praise your energy, but avoid the deep connection it demands? Because being close to you is getting closer to yourself, and not everyone is ready for that. Because looking at yourself is, in a way, looking within. And this mirror doesn't filter. It doesn't soften. It simply reflects. What others see is what they carry, and that can be unbearable. There are people who can only bear this contact for a few moments. And even in those moments, something changes. They cry, they vent, they feel relief, but they also feel exposed. And the exposure hurts more than the pain they were holding inside. That's why they run away. And that's why you're often mistaken for the cause of the pain, when in fact, you were just the mirror, the reflection, the witness. You don't provoke chaos. You merely sustain the silence where chaos can reveal itself. And that's extremely rare, because most human relationships revolve around distraction, escape, surface. But with you, distraction is impossible. Your presence compels the other to be present. And presence in a world accustomed to automaticity is an act of rupture. You don't say, feel, but your energy says, it's all here if you have the courage. And few know what to do when courage is summoned without warning. Have you ever noticed how sometimes just a glance from you is enough for someone to look away? Or how your simple question is interpreted as an accusation? Or how your silence is mistaken for judgment? This isn't about you. It's about what you activate. You're not looking outward. You're seeing through. And seeing through is dangerous for those who live hidden behind images. The fear of being seen is greater than the desire to be understood. And you see, clearly, firmly, with presence. Jung would explain this phenomenon as the activation of the projected shadow. The other person feels you see what they've spent their entire life trying to bury. And when this content surfaces, they don't know what to do, so they project. And you become the problem. You become the strange, the cold, the intense, the difficult. But all of this is merely a reflection of the inner turmoil your presence has revealed. It's not personal. It's symbolic. It's unconscious. You're like an open window in a house where everything's been locked for years. Air comes in. Light floods in. But with it comes dust. Mold. Corners no one wanted to see. You didn't create the discomfort. You just made it impossible to ignore. And in this process, people often react by withdrawing, because they still don't know how to thank something that hurt them before healing them. You become, for a time, the name of the pain they couldn't face. But what about you? Who wipes away the dust that remains? Who holds the words that were left within you as if your soul were a deposit? Who embraces your own pain of never being truly welcomed? Because the mirror also tires. It also cracks. It also needs to be seen. But few see the mirror, they only see what it reveals. You are remembered, but rarely cared for. You are sought after, but rarely understood. That's why, so often, you walk with a weariness that has no name. An exhaustion that comes not from the body, but from the heart. Because every conversation is a journey. Every encounter is a surrender. And every silence you heard became another weight held within you. Not because you wanted it to be, but because no one else wanted to hold it. And you can't simply let it fall. What do you do with all this that they give you and then pretend they never gave? Is there a way to continue being a mirror without breaking? Maybe this is your challenge now. Learning to hold your truth without having to carry the world. Because you're not here to heal others. You're here to be whole. And being whole sometimes means learning to close the door, saying no, protecting your silence, preserving your light. Because those who truly want to see themselves will return. And they will look with courage, and they will give thanks, not with words, but with presence. And if no one comes back, you'll still have something many don't: awareness. The awareness that there's another way to exist, a way where you don't pretend, where you don't run away, where you don't hide, where you feel, where you sustain yourself, where you live. And living truly is in itself a form of revolution. And perhaps that's the greatest gift you have to offer, to be a living reminder that it's possible to be real, not as a concept, not as a goal, but as a state of being. To be real, even if no one understands, even if no one stays, even if only you know. But what happens when that reminder becomes unbearable for the world around you? Maybe the next step on this journey is no longer about listening to others, but about listening to something that has been trying to speak to you for a long time. And that sound finally starts to take shape in the next part. You can be surrounded by voices, laughter, even hugs, and still feel like you're absent, that you're watching everything from the outside, that your soul doesn't fit in with what your body is experiencing. Sometimes you try to force a smile, respond with something nice, get into the rhythm of the conversation, but deep down, something remains unchanged. The feeling that you're different, not by choice, not by ego, but by nature, as if your consciousness has gone further than the surrounding environment allows. And so you observe everything as if you were on another plane, a plane where time passes more slowly, where emotions are clearer, where the collective mask simply doesn't work. Carl Jung would call this the call of individuation, a process in which the soul begins to distance itself from the crowd, not out of contempt, but out of a need for truth. He said that at some point in life, the awakened individual is forced to break away from the masses, to move away from superficial identities, social roles, and circles of repetition, because to become who you are, you must stop being what was expected of you. And this rupture is never smooth. It manifests itself in subtle ways: discomfort in groups, anguish at parties, exhaustion in shallow conversations. You find yourself smiling, but your heart is not there. Your body is present, your soul distant. Your mind is attentive but absent. You become a stranger among your own. Social neuroscience studies show that the human brain instinctively seeks belonging. Being excluded activates the same brain areas as physical pain. This means that feeling out of place literally hurts. But what if what hurts isn't being excluded, but rather forcing yourself into something that no longer resonates with who you've become? What if the greatest pain isn't loneliness, but dissonance? What happens when belonging becomes a silent violence against your authenticity? You've tried to fit in, you've copied the gestures, you've repeated the right phrases, you've worn the clothes that match the group, you've learned to laugh at the expected tempo, but it was all a performance, a theater that worked for a while, until your soul began to scream, and then you retreated. You chose silence. You preferred solitude to presence without connection, and yet you still carry the feeling of not belonging, as if there were an invisible layer separating you from the world, a layer made of sensitivity, lucidity, and a perception few share. And when you try to break through that layer, it thickens. It defends itself, and you return. This layer thickens when you try to explain what you feel, because words don't reach. How can you say the conversation was good, but you left feeling empty? How can you say that joyful celebration drained you, that the outing was beautiful, but your soul was silent? People listen, but they don't understand, or they try to rationalize. They say it's a lack of gratitude, a lack of lightness, a lack of adaptation, but none of this touches what you feel, because what you feel isn't on the surface. It's in the vibration, it's in the unspoken, and few people can reach this level of listening. A study by Yale University revealed that highly sensitive people have more intense brain activity in regions associated with empathy, nuanced perception, and deep processing of experiences. These people perceive more, they feel more, and therefore, they tire more. They are more affected by light, sound, social pressure, and especially emotional falsehood. And if you're like this, your nervous system can't handle the mask for long. It collapses internally, even when you're still smiling on the outside. Jung knew that depth exacts the price of exclusion. He said that the closer a soul gets to truth, the further it distances itself from the common noise. And this doesn't mean arrogance, it means that truth, being subtle, doesn't shout, and so it's rarely heard in crowds. Depth is silent, and profound silence is often mistaken for coldness or indifference. It's the same logic as the ocean. The deeper you go, the quieter everything becomes. But that's where the oldest and most fascinating creatures dwell. You are like these creatures. You live where few can breathe. You've been there. You've walked into a room where everyone was excited, and you felt a heaviness in the air, as if something was wrong that no one noticed, or as if the words exchanged weren't real. And you fall silent. And when you fall silent, they call you shy, strange, isolated, when in fact you're trying to respect the integrity of your feelings. And what you feel can't be contained in pre-written phrases. What you feel demands silence, listening, time, and the modern world is in a hurry. This kind of perception can't be turned off. You try to be light. You try not to care so much. You try to ignore it, but you can't. And maybe you shouldn't, because there's something valuable in this non-belonging, something sacred, something that, if you accept and understand it, can become your greatest gift. Because those who feel they don't belong in the world as it is may be the very ones who came to transform it. And every transformation first requires the discomfort of separation. The rite of passage begins with exile. This feeling of not fitting in is the first sign that you weren't born to repeat, but to rebuild. That your soul carries codes that aren't activated by noise. That your sensitivity isn't a mistake, but a tool. And that your solitude, however painful, is shaping you for something much greater than social comfort. Because you are being prepared, not to go with the flow, but to forge new paths. That's why you prefer the silences of nature to repetitive conversations. That you're moved by music more than by crowds. That you feel a book as if it were a hug. That you converse with the invisible rather than the superficial. Because your connection isn't with what's apparent, it's with what's alive, even if hidden. You don't want distraction. You want depth. You want presence. In 2021, a survey by the American Psychological Association revealed that 61% of young adults feel disconnected from the people around them, not because of physical isolation, but because of a lack of real connection. This shows that what you feel isn't just personal, it's collective. We live in an era where there are many voices and few encounters, many contacts and few connections. And this, for someone like you, is almost unbearable, because you can't stand an absent presence. You can't stand generic affection. You need the real thing. Jung warned of the danger of forced normalcy. He said that adapting perfectly to a sick world is not a sign of health. And when you feel like you don't belong, perhaps it's because your soul is preserving your sanity. Because deep down, you don't want to fit in. You want to be whole. And being whole in a fragmented world requires courage. Courage to unlearn. Courage to be alone. Courage to rebuild everything from within. This courage begins when you stop blaming yourself for not being where others seem happy. When you accept that there's something inside you that seeks more than approval, that desires more than inclusion, that needs more than companionship. It needs truth. And truth sometimes is only found when we're alone, because only in solitude can we hear our own voice and separate what's ours from the noise. But this solitude doesn't have to be a punishment. It can be a temple. It can be a school. It can be the sacred ground where your soul flourishes. You no longer need to pretend to belong. You don't need to diminish yourself to be accepted. You don't need to betray yourself to maintain connections. Because the life that truly awaits you begins when you start living according to how you feel, and not what others expect of you. This choice isn't easy, and it can seem scary, because you will lose. You will lose people, places, habits, but you will find yourself. You will discover that there is a new world waiting for you, a world made of real connections, of gazes that penetrate, of presences that don't judge, of silences that welcome. And this world isn't out there. It begins within. It begins the moment you allow yourself to be who you've always been. And maybe one day, someone will enter this world and recognize you, And upon recognizing you, you'll feel for the first time whole, alongside someone. No need to explain, no need to hide, just being. And maybe that moment won't be long in coming. Maybe it's closer than you think. Maybe it will begin exactly when you accept that not belonging is, in fact, your first step toward finding your place. Because your place was never in the crowd. Your place is where truth touches the ground, where the soul breathes, where presence is enough. And that place exists, even if it's still empty, even if no one has arrived, because you're already there. And the next part of this journey will show you what happens when you stop waiting for recognition and start recognizing yourself completely. There are times when everything seems calm on the outside, but inside there's a silent whirlwind. You wake up, fulfill your commitments, talk to people, even laugh, but you feel like you're just acting out a functional version of yourself. There's something inside you that remains restless, a voice without sound, a formless anguish, as if a part of your soul knows something is still missing, even when everything seems to be in place. Carl Jung would call this a symptom of the soul in transition, a clear sign that the psyche is seeking the next stage of consciousness, even if the rational mind is still trying to maintain the old structures. And it is in this space of tension, between what we were and what we have not yet managed to become, that true transformation begins. But this transition doesn't come with a manual, it comes with questions. And the right questions, when well posed, can completely change the course of a life. Have you ever wondered why you keep repeating certain situations? Why do you keep getting involved with the same types of people, facing the same conflicts, falling into the same emotional abysses? The answer may not lie in what the other person did, but in something much deeper, in unconscious patterns you've carried since long before you became self-aware, patterns that repeat themselves as if they were destiny, but which are actually invitations to awaken. Jung believed that whatever is not brought to consciousness returns as fate. This means that until you address the origin of your patterns, they will continue to appear in new forms, in new people, but always with the same effect, confronting you with what needs to be understood and integrated. And the more you deny it, the more intense the cycle becomes, because the unconscious doesn't give up, it just changes its appearance. How many times have you found yourself trapped in a relationship you knew wasn't healthy, but couldn't leave? How many times have you remained silent in situations that demanded your voice? How many times have you sabotaged yourself in moments when you were about to grow? All of this may seem like weakness at first glance, but deep down, it's a manifestation of something deeper. Unresolved internal conflicts, unintegrated archetypes, parts of your psyche that still operate in automatic pain mode. And this is where the narrative shifts, because you are not a victim of these patterns. You are their creator. Unconscious, yes, but creator nonetheless. And if you can create, you can also undo. You can rebuild. You can rewrite. But to do so, you must look within with courage, with brutal honesty, with a willingness to navigate the discomfort of seeing yourself unfiltered. Have you ever noticed how certain emotional triggers always take you to the same places? As if there were an invisible script guiding your reaction? This is the unconscious in action, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. Every intense emotion is a letter from your soul asking to be read. Every discomfort is a door to self-knowledge. But the modern world has taught us to run away from this. It has taught us to numb, to accelerate, to consume, anything to avoid feeling. But you feel. And that's your gift. Your sensitivity is the bridge to the invisible, to what lies behind the masks. That's why you can no longer bear superficial conversations. That's why your soul grows weary in environments where the truth is hidden. That's why your body gives you signs when your energy is being drained. You feel it, even before you understand, even before you think. Jung would say that you are in touch with the self, the regulating center of the psyche, the deepest essence of being. And this contact comes at a price, the deconstruction of everything that isn't you. The characters, the roles, the fantasies, everything that was built to protect you, but has now become a prison. And this is where many people stop, because breaking with fantasy requires crossing the void. And the void is frightening. The void feels like death. But in truth, It is the womb of new life. Have you ever faced this emptiness? Have you ever had nights where you couldn't name what you felt? Have you ever cried for no apparent reason? Have you ever felt like disappearing, not out of giving up, but out of exhaustion? These moments, however difficult, are part of the process. They are the cocoon that precedes flight. They are the cracks through which the light enters. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of rebirth. And in this process, everything intensifies. Memories surface. Strange dreams occur. You begin to recall childhood experiences that seemed forgotten. You begin to notice recurring family patterns. You begin to feel the presence of parts of yourself that have been silenced. And all of this requires acceptance. Not judgment, not rushing, just presence. You don't have to solve everything right now, or understand everything right now. But you do need to be willing not to run away, because running away costs more than facing it. Running away exacts high interest rates on your health, on your relationships, on your meaning. And you've run away enough. Now it's time to turn inward, to face the mirror, to touch your own soul. Jung said that integrating the shadow, everything we deny within ourselves, is the key to individuation. And this integration doesn't happen with techniques. It happens with truth, with presence, with silence, with humility. Because the shadow isn't evil, it's just excluded. And everything that's excluded becomes distortion. When you embrace it, you transform it. When you reject it, you perpetuate it. Have you ever wondered what's hidden in your shadow? What talents have you buried to be accepted? What impulses have you stifled for fear of rejection? What parts of yourself have you deemed weak, wrong, or inadequate? All of this is begging to be resurrected, not to dominate, but to reintegrate. Because you will only be whole when all your parts can exist within you with dignity. This journey isn't quick, nor linear, but it is sacred. Because by walking inward, you are, in fact, clearing the way for others to do the same. Your healing is collective. Your awakening opens space for new worlds. You are not alone. Even when you feel alone, there is an invisible network of souls awakening, each in their own way, each in their own time, but all guided by the same impulse to truly live. And truly living means living in touch with what you feel. It's stopping following scripts and starting to write your own narrative. It's taking the risk of being you, even if it scares you, even if it bothers you, even if it costs you old bonds. Because what you'll find in your whole self is worth more than any external approval. It's worth more than any empty comfort. It's worth more than any mask that prevented you from breathing. And when you start living this way, something magical happens. You begin to attract people who are also on this path. You begin to create bonds that nourish. You begin to realize that your solitude was just clearing the space for the right presences to arrive. You begin to live with meaning, and meaning is what heals. Life stops being about survival and becomes expression. You stop reacting and start creating. You stop begging for love and start overflowing. And when that happens, even your pain gains dignity, because you understand that it was part of the process, that it was the portal, that it was the calling. And now that you've crossed over, you're ready for something new, something that can't be explained, it's lived, something that can't be taught, it's felt, something that begins exactly the moment you choose to stay present. And that choice will be the focus of the next part. Everything you've experienced so far was necessary. Every silence, every tear, every night you thought about giving up. None of it was in vain, because in some silent way your soul was being shaped. Every fall taught you a new way to get back up. Every disappointment exposed a part of you that deserved more care. And now, having arrived here, something inside you begins to awaken. The pain doesn't disappear suddenly, but it begins to have purpose. It begins to have direction. It begins to transform into wisdom. It becomes a map, not a wound. It becomes a seed, not a punishment. Carl Jung said that we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but rather by becoming conscious of the darkness. And that's what you've done throughout this journey. You've looked within. You've touched your shadow. You've recognized your cycles. You've confronted what you've always tried to avoid. And now you possess something few possess: emotional lucidity. This lucidity, however, isn't a prize. It's a responsibility. Because knowing what needs to change is only the first step. The real challenge begins when you try to live what you've understood, when you try to put into practice the truth that previously existed only as an idea. This is where the practical part begins. The transition from knowing to being. And this requires discipline, yes, but an emotional, existential discipline. A discipline born of self-love, not rigidity. One born of the genuine desire to no longer betray your soul. Therefore, before discussing external practices, you need to align your internal intention. Ask yourself, am I willing to live my truth, even if it distances me from old habits? Am I ready to abandon roles that protected me but also imprisoned me? Do I have enough courage to sustain my authenticity when it is misinterpreted or judged? If the answer is yes, then you're ready to apply. But if the answer is, I don't know yet, that's okay. Honesty with your current situation is also a step toward healing. The important thing is not to deceive yourself. The path to transformation doesn't require haste, but integrity. The first practical application begins with what Jung called active listening to the soul. Set aside 15 minutes a day without distractions to simply listen to yourself. It's not guided meditation. It's not reading. It's presence. Sit in silence, close your eyes, and ask, what am I really feeling today? What is my body trying to tell me? What is my soul trying to show me? Let it come. Without judging, without trying to change. Just observe. Over time, you will notice emotional patterns that previously went unnoticed. And you can only transform what you recognize. The second practice is shadow writing. Once a week, grab a pen and paper and write, what am I denying within myself? Write without censorship. Let your hand run wild. Write down the thoughts you would normally hide. Not to feed the pain, but to illuminate what was hidden. Often, the shadow just wants to be seen. And when it's seen with courage and respect, it loses its power to sabotage. It's not about judging these parts, but about accepting them. Transformation isn't about exclusion. It's about reintegration. Third practice, small symbolic ruptures. Once a month, do something that symbolizes a break with an old version of yourself. It could be throwing away clothes that represent a character you no longer are. It could be ending a toxic cycle. It could be writing a farewell letter to a mental pattern. It could be changing the way you talk to yourself. Symbolism is powerful because it communicates with the unconscious. And when the unconscious understands that something new is being constructed, it cooperates. It begins to offer you new images, new answers, new paths. Fourth practice. Create a physical space that reflects who you are becoming. It could be a small table with elements that connect you with your truth. A candle, a book, a plant, a meaningful object. This space isn't decorative. It's a reminder, an intimate altar of your transformation. Every time you're near this place, your soul will remember the path. This environment becomes a silent sanctuary of your intention. Even on difficult days, it will be there to remind you of who you are becoming. Fifth practice, the courage to say no. Learn to say no firmly and peacefully. No to what distances you from yourself. No to what demands your mask. No to what saps your energy. No is one of the purest forms of self-love, because every time you say yes to please others but deny yourself, something inside you dies. Learn to choose yourself without guilt. No is a seed of freedom, and each true no plants the possibility of a more complete yes. Sixth practice, presence in connections. Choose who you share your truth with. It's not about isolating yourself, but about selecting. Surround yourself with people who listen to you without trying to fix you, who respect your silence, who don't mistake your depth for a problem. Being among equals is a sigh of relief. And if you haven't found these people yet, that's okay. Until they arrive, be that kind of presence for yourself. Nourish yourself as you would like to be nourished. Offer yourself the gaze you so desperately seek. Seventh practice, weekly closing ritual. At the end of each week before bed, sit with yourself. Ask yourself, what did I honor in myself this week? What did I ignore? What do I need to change? This creates a bridge between your days and your essence, and transforms your life into a continuous process of integration. You begin to realize that each week is a chapter, and that your body, your emotions, your intuition, everything is writing this story with you. These practices are simple, yet powerful. The secret isn't complexity, it's consistency, because it's through loving repetition that the soul learns to trust. And when the soul trusts, it blossoms. You begin to feel more whole, more aligned, more true, and that changes everything. You feel your energy organizing, your mind quiets, your body aligns. It changes the way you love, because you stop begging for affection. It changes the way you work, because you stop sacrificing yourself for goals that don't make sense. It changes the way you live, because you stop chasing external validation and start guiding yourself internally. And that is freedom. A freedom that doesn't shout but sustains, that doesn't impose but inspires. But this freedom comes at a cost, taking responsibility for yourself. You can no longer blame others. You can no longer live on autopilot. Now that you see, now that you feel, you can no longer pretend. You know too much to go back. And that's beautiful, because that's where your true life begins. The life where everything has presence, where everything has meaning, where everything has a soul. You will fall, yes. You will doubt, you will tire, you will want to stop. But something inside you has already changed, and this change is irreversible, because what has been touched by the truth can no longer accommodate lies. And you know this. That's why you're here. Because you feel it, because you intuit it, because you want to live fully. Because, even without knowing your destination, you can no longer go back to where you started. So take a deep breath, feel your chest, feel your feet on the ground, and say to yourself, in the most sincere voice you can find, I allow myself to live my truth. Say this every day, until this phrase becomes a presence, until your life speaks it for you, until your existence becomes in itself a reminder that it's possible to be true in a world of masks, until others, upon seeing you, feel they can allow themselves to be too. Now that we've reached the end of this journey, I leave you with this invitation. Don't stop here. Keep going. Keep listening to yourself. Keep choosing yourself. Keep finding yourself. Keep transforming every moment into a portal, every emotion into a bridge, every gesture into a ritual of presence. And if this content touched you, if it awakened something within you, if it accompanied you silently when no one else understood, then consider subscribing here on the Deep Psyche channel. This helps us reach more people who, like you, are also searching for meaning, presence, and healing. Like this video so it reaches those who need it most. And if you feel any, share your experience, your question, or your pain in the comments, anonymously if you wish. This space is safe. It's yours. It's ours. Here, every voice has value. Every truth has a place. Thank you for being here. Thank you for existing. Thank you for not giving up on yourself. And remember, your soul knows the way. Trust it and walk. Even when afraid, even when in doubt, walk with your heart alight. See you on the next journey.